abolition of the slave trade. Now, we'll have a bit of a Q&A afterwards, but I thought I would just come, and as it's, I guess, the last day of October, well, it's a spooky Halloween day, but we are going to talk a little bit about what happened at that time and give you a little bit of facts, and then we'll have a little bit of a question and answer session at the end. Okay? Maybe you might know some of these facts already. Okay, so what was the transatlantic slave trade? And I will just give you a summation in a nutshell. This was the transportation of enslaved African people by slave traders from their African countries of origin to mainly the Americas, as they called it, when they were sold on for profit. Okay? So, our story begins a long time ago during the 15th to the 19th century. Many countries in West Africa were discovered by European explorers on a quest to find people who would labour for them on their plantations. This was to boost their supply of goods for trade. Once they saw the original dwellers, they made contact with the leaders and exchanged people for goods or took them by force. Now, to elaborate a bit more on that, was that there was slavery that was going on. Slavery's gone on for many years in various different countries and cultures. And in Africa, they had people that they enslaved themselves amongst their own kind of, I guess, people. They had tribes. So they would have people that, I guess, they fought with. Then they would take them and they would become prisoners of war and they would become their slaves. So when the European traders came over, they would try to get some of these slaves by saying to the tribes leaders, could we have these people in exchange for things that I think the African peoples thought were really valuable, but were not really valuable. So things like guns, gunpowder, I guess things like gems and, you know, pretty things. Things that they thought would give them, I think, a bit of power and a bit of bling, something that would make them, status. You know, make them look like they're different to everybody else, and they were kind of in awe of this. Little did they know that what they were exchanging, because as we all know, anybody's life is not up for sale, regardless of where you come from. And they thought that this was fine to do at the time. And then African people were taken from their villages and they were taken to ports. And then they were put on these large ships, but like volumes of people were put on these large ships. It wasn't just like you'd get on a boat now and, you know, you'd have a bit of a cruise. Yeah, a lot of people were put on there. They were actually packed in like sardines. And I have a photo to show you, although it's not super clear. I'll let it go round the room, but I can bring it up a little bit towards the camera. And you can see these are people packed like head to tail. Yeah, top to toe, like so small. Yeah, so people just packed in, and they weren't only, and they weren't only what I would say, you know, they weren't only there, you know, like you think, okay, well, it's going to be there for a short amount of time, like a day or something. No, sometimes it took months, because obviously a place is very far away. So it's not like we're just going across the ferry in Woolwich and you just got all the people in and let's go over there. It took sometimes months to get to another place. And there was a thing called, I'll go into it, but they travelled in a particular kind of shape. So let me say, it was known as the Middle Passage. So the Middle Passage is when you're taken from one place and you're on the boat and you're going over. So in other words, that's the middle bit. Then you go over to somewhere else. When you get on another boat, that is the other bit, the Middle Passage. So it was done in a triangular way. So it was taken from one place, taken to another place, and then they were sorted, picked who they want, blah, 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 and then taken over to finally where they'll go and work and, you know, used it to boost the economy in those particular regions. There was a lot of atrocities. It wasn't only just that people are packed in. There was atrocities that used to happen on board. I mean, the picture says it as well, that one where they're kind of shackled by their neck, and another person, you got like a little bit of length, you got another person in front of you, then you can have it on your feet, and everybody is kind of walking in a line where it was to keep everybody together.
It also says, this is how much women were kept, this is how much boys were kept, and this is how much men.
Okay, we'll have to have a deeper look at that. So these are the different quarters, yeah? They were also subjected to things on there, not only the lack of space, but things like violence, beaten, sexual things. Starvation. Obviously, people died of lack of personal hygiene and food and medical care. So people died on there. So you could be on the boat, and you could be next to somebody that has probably died or has some type of illness. Can you imagine, just now we're thinking about coughing on people and like, catch it, bin it, kill it. There, you're next to somebody that could possibly have some type of illness that is going to now be moved around to everybody, not just by coughing, just by having that close proximity. People obviously were married and they had their children on there as well, because they did take families. And so to be there with not being able to live a family life fully, to do things that you wanted to do, would be difficult. People also had their babies, and their babies would die because obviously they're not as robust as older people. And also people committed suicide a lot. People don't know, there's little known facts like that. People committed suicide because they felt that not only was this not the life for them to live, but there's a lot of things like, you know, spiritual and folklore kind of beliefs. So people believed that if they did that, they would return back to where, you know, their soul would return back to where they originated from. So a lot of people felt that that's what they wanted to do. And I didn't know this until I really delved further into it, because a lot of people will tackle this in the Q&A, but a lot of people, their whole argument would be, well, why did they go along with it? You know, like, you take a whole bunch of people, I'm sure there's people in this room that have a resolve to be like, you're not taking me, you know, I'm not going where I don't want to go. There were people that were doing that. There were a lot of uprisings, and there were a lot of people that tried to fight off, you know, the whole thing happening to them. And there are tribes that are really known to be really strong tribes that just don't take things lying down. Subsequently, they were hired by the slave masters to do higher jobs, to do things that were, I guess, not as much in a slave kind of way, you know, and some of them became free slaves, if you can call it, or free people. So yeah, that's on the Middle Passage. And then we had, there's a whole bunch of things between 1662 and 1807. I think people don't have an estimation. I guess it's a guesstimation. 3.1 million Africans were shipped across the ocean, but nobody really has a final figure, because really, how do you document everything? Also, I don't know if people know this, but there were ledgers. Now, a ledger is a book that people write things in case you didn't know, and they document it. And there were ledgers of people. Some, I guess they're taking these kind of statistics from ledgers. If you're super organised, or if you're above board, I guess, if you can call things like this above board, people wrote names of people down, and then names of their slaves that they gave them. So a lot of identity was stripped from people as well, because they weren't allowed to keep their original African names. They were given names, and that's the reason why a lot of names now of black people sound quite European, because they're not their original names, they were just given to them. And they had these ledgers alongside, I would say, documentation of livestock and furniture and bits and bobs, just regular like that. But these are people. And then when they were taken to the ports, they were chosen by various different slave traders, going around a line of them and having a look, poking, prodding, just trying to figure out how they fit in to their bigger picture. The first people that started the slave trade were the Portuguese, and then subsequently you had the Dutch, you had the British, you had the Germans, a whole bunch of different people, Spanish. A lot of people just came in after, but the Portuguese were the first. And it did make them a lot of money. There were European people subsequently that were helpful in the abolition of the slave trade. So there were people that didn't want it to happen. I don't know if you've watched that movie. I watched it the other day. Oh, what's that one? The one that starts, you know...
12 Years a Slave?
No, I saw that one. There's the one... Huh? No, Roots. I don't like Roots. I've never watched Roots.
Have you not?
No, I can't.
Why?
It's it'd be too much for me, I think.
But I mean, it's hurtful but brilliant.
No, I watched Amistad. Now, Amistad was based on a true story. And it was based on, you know, a ship of slaves and people that had kind of revolted. They'd taken it over, and then when they came to a port, they was subsequently captured again, and then they were tried. And there were so many people that came forward to claim them. It was crazy. You have to see that movie. The people that were on board the ship, they hid the ledgers in, like, the boat had some kind of, you know, like, I guess what would you call it?
Cubby hole?
Yeah, some type of cubby hole, or you know where they got the vents. They kind of stuck these things in there, and it was only when the ship was searched and they picked it up that they found who actually was on board the ship. But there were so many, and who supposedly had owned, because people claimed them. And when you're not really written down, nobody knows where you come from. Nobody knows what country. They didn't even know what country the people came from. They didn't know how to speak to them, what language. And then it was just one guy that was, I guess, it was a free black man, and he was walking past and he could hear, and it was actually very lucky that this was his country, and they were able to translate. It was just the mind boggles, you know, and a lot of things. A lot of countries were stripped of their goods, you know, a lot of the diamonds, a lot of I would say a lot of materials that are still, I guess, manufactured over in countries, and the countries were rich, so but I don't think that the African people really
Have you seen Blood Diamond?
No. Yeah, maybe. I should watch that again, actually. But a lot of it, I don't think people realised at the time that how good a lot of the fuels, a lot of the, you know, things that were good, how much they were worth. You know, I mean, we can say that, you know, this is a developing country and Africa wasn't a developing country, but I guess they used their resources for different things. It just wasn't to, I guess, pave the streets or adorn their bodies or whatever. A lot of their stuff, they didn't really use their resources for, I guess, people thought, forward movement or things like that. And so Benin, apparently one of the countries, a very, very rich country, has got so much, like, you know, metals and things like that. Like if you watch Black Panther, they got vibranium. You have a lot of African countries that have things, that pure metals that are just literally, you know, so full of sources and minerals, and people don't really, they don't really know. But I mean, I guess they probably know now. But Benin was a real great one when I started to learn about it. They did a lot of jewelry and statues and things out of their own resources. They kind of, I wouldn't say forward thinking because I don't really want to say that, but they used it to what they had, their resources. They recognized that one was something that, you know, people would really want to see. And as you know, there's a lot of things that are artifacts that were taken, and they still remain today in some museums. So that's it really. I mean, I'm not sure, I didn't want to go really deep into it. I think I've given you a basic overview. I think we can have like a discussion if anybody knows anything, or if they want to ask anything. I have a few facts that I could ask the questions and see if you know, and then I could answer the questions. But if you have anything, does anybody have anything that they want to?
Yeah, it's probably a bit of a controversial point actually.
Sure.
Part of my history, my ancestry, is that my family from India were taken over on the slave boats to the Caribbean, and so you had much the similar situation. Many people drowned themselves in the Ganges and in southern India because they didn't want to be taken away from their families, didn't want to become slaves, not even indentured servants.
That's it.
But they, you know, like you say, when you're shackled to everybody else, it's you cannot escape.
No.
You know, you might want to give up your life, but then that other person might want to fight for theirs, so you don't really know what to do.
That's it.
But and it was the same. It's the same situation where you had the British took away the identities, the religious identity and the your Indian names, and you couldn't do things if you didn't convert to Christianity. You to own property, to even have a job, to do anything, you had to become Christian. So in their homes they would practice Hinduism, and then you had many with a Muslim identity as well. But that was allowed to continue because the British and the Muslims had an agreement. And so it was really the Hindus who were really hounded into giving up that part of their identity and who they were. So to go back to my point was that when you're reading about Black History Month, I know that it's recently come to incorporate what happened with the Indians as well. But how much of that is actually studied from the point of view of this happened in India? Is anything actually mentioned about it? Because I know it's maybe not to the same extent that the Africans were uprooted from their homes and taken across in the slave trade, the triangle slave trade. But it's still a huge big part of many people's histories who now live in Britain and in Holland as well. So I just wondered how much emphasis is put on the Indian side of things as well as just the African side.
I don't think there is any, and I think
I see very
It's a very good point, isn't it?
I think
I can't. Sorry.
No, go.
No, I just feel I can't. I mean, I will learn about it and I will teach my kids about it from our point of view. But I feel I can't really be part of Black History Month because even though it's supposed to incorporate the Indians as well, we're not really represented.
I think I've seen a lot of people. If people want to do something, nobody's saying don't do it. And I thought that was what was happening quite a few years, that people from all different cultures were actually, coming in, like BAME communities. They were coming in and doing various events. So I'm not really sure, but I don't think anybody would say that you couldn't do it if you wanted to do your own and really bring it to light. I don't think it should be just for 1 month.
No, that's the thing. No. It shouldn't be just for let's
definitely
celebrate 1 month. It should
no.
be like an everyday, an everyday or like a monthly thing. People just remember this is where we've come from. This is what happened at this point in history all those years ago. Just to really keep it at the forefront of our minds to stop doing this to people.
My ancestors came from Calcutta to Grenada.
Oh, I see.
Well, you've got loads of mix. Now, I was going to ask you this, or not even ask you this, not even ask you, but just kind of say to you, this is only just touched upon in schools.
Now,
they don't talk about it.
Just touch upon in schools now, but how many schools talk about what you're saying?
None.
None.
They don't because of the history between Britain and India, where obviously like the Queen was Empress of India, and they had this. It's the same thing that happened as what you described. But because we had the Queen as like the head of state, as Empress of India, it was seen as more acceptable that this was going to happen. And this is what I have been this is what I've had relayed to me by, you know, some Guyanese people.
Yeah.
My family's from Guyana. And it's just, and I think because of the contentious history between Britain and India, I don't think they could really give it much attention in schools, because it would really pick up all these questions about, well, why did the Indians let this happen in the first place? Why did they let the Europeans come and take over?
I mean, it's a question that's going to be asked here.
It's not so much that you let it happen, though.
No.
If someone invades your country with guns and can kill your family on sight, what are you going to do? You know,
a lot of people have that kind of emotion, even black people.
Well,
I've spoken. Yeah, I've spoken to, when I've done this a couple of places, just talk to people, because usually I do a bit of dance with it, and we kind of do a bit more of theatre in it. I just think I have talked to people, it's especially like the older generation, and they're kind of, this lady, she was just like, she was adamant that how foolish were black people. How foolish were these African people to just allow it. I mean,
to be fair, a lot of the slave traders, and they'd send out recruiters that would ambush villagers at night.
Yes.
You know, a lot. There was toilet blocks and things like that. You know, obviously, you've got the huts, and then there's allotted places where that you would go to a toilet, to go out and gather food. They'd be taken from those places. The villagers wouldn't have a clue it had happened for hours.
Yeah.
So you come back, you can't find your husband.
Yeah. You sent your son to go and get something. He's not back. He's 15. He's gone. He's down by the dock. You know, you don't know.
That's what I mean. But the thing is, that's not stupidity on that part. That's obviously calculating, and that's callousness. You know, and we have that in every you know, cultural race. You know, but the thing about it is, it's okay. Yeah. But the thing is, you know, what we want people to understand is that nobody took it lying down. Yeah. There were people that sold off people, but there weren't people just going, "Oh yes, I'm okay. You're this great being." No, people were like, "Well, what are we doing? Why you know, why are you taking me somewhere I don't want to go to?"
No one ever said take me.
No one asked.
Take me overseas to be a slave.
And no one discussed it with anyone. It wasn't that way. So there was a lot of corruption in everything. But the thing is, I find still in this day and age, incredulous, that it's not being talked about more or told to people, just so that they know. Because what you will find is that people don't know the history of things. So people think that the way that people got here is that they just flooded the borders in immigration, like what's happening now. Like people are coming and people are upset that they're not, you know, there's not more stringent measures. It's not that. People came and they were brought here for the Windrush. They were brought here for a reason. People don't understand it. They're like, "Oh, well, why are you in my country?" Dude, there's people everywhere in the world. It's like a mixture of people, because people brought them there against their will, or they came and they helped to build that country up. You know, if you look at like, okay, so if you look in like France and a lot of the European areas of the world as well that have a lot of people from various different places. I was thinking the other day, there's nothing you can do about you know, a lot of the French Africans and all the African countries that speak a different language, like a European language. You can't do anything about that because you went there, and so and now they come in here, they speak your language. Inevitably, you're going to have them in your presence because what they know is that language.
Yeah.
And what can you do? You can't turn the clock back.
Borders are blending.
Yeah.
And more open in a way of accessibility. In legal fashion.
Yes.
Now, you know, it's so much easier. Not everyone wishes to do it legally, obviously.
No.
As we found out.
Yeah.
Or are able to.
Or are able to.
Yeah.
You know, but then sometimes you look at, like, you know, how much the people smugglers charge, and you think these families are paying them to do that. Actually, that's probably enough for them to do it the right way, to do it legally.
Yeah.
Those people that are paying that money to be smuggled, they could probably have done it the correct way.
For me, I just think it's nonsensical, but you know, I'm not coming from where they're coming from. I don't know how desperate their lives are, but I just think you know, a lot more historical things need to be explained to people so that you don't get people that believe that Brexit is a good thing because they want to keep people out, or they want to cleanse their country. If they really knew their history, they would understand why other people are here.
I was taught this in school. I was taught about the slave trade and so on.
I just find it,
And
but
after the war, other countries were invited to like come and join us to help support us and rebuild the country.
So where did it skip? Because there's loads of people that do not seem to understand.
But even after the war, people were allowed to come over from the Caribbean.
Yes.
Over to Holland, over to Britain. Yeah. People who had previously been, whose ancestors had been part of the slave trade previously. People who then had, you know, their homes and everything set up. Your only way of getting out of that situation of poverty, the British or your colonized,
colonial,
they could put you in, was to come over to this country and become a civil servant, or do kind of manual hard labour, you know, building homes and whatever else for the British people. But that's your contribution to Britain that you could be a part of, you could be consenting to.
So there's a whole bunch of things that people have already agreed, but then people that
no
literally don't know. It's like, and then that's what I don't understand about the whole Brexit thing is like people in rural areas, they may not have a lot of saturation of people from different places, but surely by now you would have had that in school or read up on stuff and really understand about different people. You know, but people that are different.
Not really. I think
understand
schools
it.
over here, they only teach about English history and they cherry pick what they want.
I thought curriculum was widespread.
within
I thought the
English
curriculum
history.
was widespread. Is it not?
It's like, even in the UK citizens were treated as slaves. Workhouses, children made to work at the ages of like 3 in machinery, getting mutilated, getting TB in confined
There's not a lot of-
I think they made the country so diverse and broad that actually they might get 15 years on slave trade.
Yeah, it's very little, very little.
To what people really need to know.
And the kids might be really interested and want to know more. No, we've got no time. We've got to move on.
If they overeducate people and get them thinking for themselves, then there's going to be huge political and social change coming faster in society, and the government doesn't want that because then they lose the control over people.
The problem is,
I agree.
people in general like to leave little spots out of history.
Just to suit themselves.
It's like over here, like in World War II. After World War II, there were children sent over to Australia without their parents' consent or anything.
I never heard of that.
Yeah, happened. And these kids were beaten, raped, and made to work because they could. Because they could do it.
Because they'd lost their families.
Because they lost their families.
So
like single
it's like,
mothers.
They were sent to a better life because obviously Britain was struggling after the war.
They were sent to missionary
So they can have
camps.
a better life in Australia. And
What was Australia looked at as? Because
It was
I've heard
looked
that
at
the
as
prisoners went over there as well. What was it?
That
Is it
was
like
in
a
the
dumping ground or
17th. That
something?
started in the 17th century. And then from there, it became an exporter as well because they can mass farm because it's such a large landscape.
And then the thing as well is like, you know, they don't want to show us up to be a bad country.
No.
We allowed this to happen.
Yeah.
But
So we're not going to talk about it because that's a blight on our history. So we'll just ignore it and hope it goes away.
they do it throughout the world, and I think it's really wrong. It's like everyone goes, oh, but like it's like I've got a Jewish background. People were slaves in Egypt, and from then it's like they were slaves by the Romans. They were slaves.
There's been
by the
obviously
Greeks,
slavery
like
throughout the whole
Macedonia,
of
Persia.
the beginning of time.
Oh yeah.
It's a form of control.
Yeah.
It's become a
And
form
power.
of control and humiliation.
Yes, and yep.
It's
And
like
free
they will
labour.
try- It's
Free
like
labour, yeah.
a friend of mine who was from Ivory Coast, and he was kept a slave by a Nigerian family.
Yeah.
And they said, because you're from there, you're nothing. You're an animal. They told him that.
I saw a story the other day. This father and son kind of duo. They had taken this guy off of that was homeless off the streets with special needs and had him as a slave.
Yeah.
And this is England. This is just
Oh
out
yeah,
London.
this
And they
happens.
were beating him. And when they found him, the police actually found him after somebody had kind of, you know, spoken up about it. There wasn't a place on his body that he hadn't been beaten. So this guy gets taken up thinking that he's going to be helped, and given somewhere to live.
It's very common with disabled people to be taken advantage of.
It's like what people do, like Eastern Europeans. Like when people go on holiday, people have been had children kidnapped, and they're sold into slave trade, sex trafficking, everything. Like I used to live in Corfu, that was near Albania, and there were kids who used to be taken off the beaches. But the thing was, I was treated with xenophobia over there for being British, Jewish, and whatever else. And I was always referred to as Xenos, which is immigrant or outsider, or basically alien.
Does it sound like we want to be in this world?
It's sadly, it's because of fear and culture. But the thing was, Corfu was defended by militant groups of the West from the Turks, who were killing Jewish families, causing mass genocide. They killed 10,000 Jews in World War II. And I mean, from women and children. Whilst the men were trying to fight, they went off to war. Corfu was basically a target for the Italians and the Turks. And when they went there, they killed so many women and children and just chucked their bodies into the castle moat. And that's a sad thing to have happened. And it's like, I've got family who have came over, can't remember where, but they were escaping from things. Like even in Russia, Jews were slaves in even early 19th century. And it's gone on and on. It's the humiliation of power, the humiliation of greed, because someone can tell you what to do. And it's gone on that way for ages. Even China was real bad with it. Like, that's why places like Mongolia actually had probably the best sort of defence against them, because they weren't going to go down without a fight. And that's the thing, like China used to take over whole towns. There was one incident where an army of like 250,000 strong took over a whole little country, and they ate the place dry. And then when the food ran out, they looked at the villagers.
What to eat them?
They ate them. They ate everything.
Nasty. I know.
And they wiped out 30,000 in 3 days.
Cannibalism, Tom.
What?
Cannibalism. You know what that is.
But it's like...
When you eat humans.
When humans eat humans.
Yeah.
But people, it's like, even in like, with the Spanish, when they went over to like South America, Mexico, though the people, I know it was a different culture, and they done self-sacrifice, but that was for it wasn't, not everyone was like that. There were the large civilizations like that over there, but they caused genocide on a massive scale, and it's not talked about over there. They don't even people still there who are tribal get wiped out by logging companies because their government pays to keep it hush. And it's like,
what's she doing? She's eating the popcorn, isn't she? Yeah.
On a mass scale, like I think it was something like over 1 million in Brazil, where there was a civilization over there. Over 1 million people, which were like multiple different tribes, were just wiped out because they would want to pray to Christ or Mary.
Skylar, no thank you.
That's why I say to people that a lot of things have been done in the name of people's religious beliefs as well.
Which is quite funny.
Which is kind of defeating the purpose of what it's really supposed to be.
That's why religion is evil in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
It's used as a tool to control.
That's it. Religion isn't evil, it's run by evil people.
And then they use it for their own ends. And they interpret it in the way that they want to interpret it and say to you. And if you're a person that I guess is a little bit
vulnerable,
then I just don't get it.
Well, I think it's been a brilliant talk.
Yeah, your hand's hurting.
We've done 34 minutes, which I think is pretty good, and I'm sure everyone's learnt something that they didn't know about today.
I do, definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm going to stop recording now. I can carry on talking after a few months, but thanks, Tatiana.